A routine traffic stop, barely a minute or two. No speeding, no reckless driving, nothing that would normally raise concern. And yet, by the end of it, the driver walked away without a license for 6 months. Not because of dangerous behavior, but because of a law that hadn't even existed 3 weeks earlier. That's the part most people never see coming. The rules didn't just change, they shifted in real time, catching people off guard. Right now, there's one specific rule, number 3 on this list, that has already triggered over 12,000 citations nationwide, with average fines close to $500. And the majority of those drivers had no idea they were doing anything wrong. Which raises a serious question. If that many people can be caught this quickly, how many others are still driving today without realizing they're already at risk? Because these aren't small updates. This isn't about minor speeding or rolling stops. These are structural changes that affect how you drive, where items can be placed inside your vehicle, how your behavior is monitored, and in some cases, whether your car will even allow you to operate it. The most concerning part is that you could follow habits built over decades and still be out of compliance the moment you get on the road. So, before assuming everything is fine, there's something important you need to understand. Because in 2026, the margin for error has practically disappeared. Hi, I'm Timothy, and you're watching US Updates Hub. I track how driving laws evolve, not just on paper, but how they're actually enforced on real drivers. And what changed at the start of 2026 isn't typical. This marks one of the biggest shifts in driving regulations in over a decade. Entire states introduced new enforcement systems, redefined violations, and in some cases rolled out technology that monitors behavior in ways most drivers don't even realize yet. If you're still driving like it's 2025, there's a strong chance you're already out of compliance without knowing it. And that's exactly how people are getting caught. Responsible drivers, cautious drivers, people with clean records suddenly facing fines, points, or worse. In this video, we'll break down 10 of these new rules, starting with the ones that seem minor but are catching thousands of drivers, all the way to the top 3 causing the biggest financial and legal impact right now. More importantly, you'll understand what needs to change starting today so you don't end up in the same situation. For years, drivers relied on a simple instinct. When a light turns yellow, you have just enough time to clear the intersection. That assumption no longer holds. In 2026, that margin has been removed. 14 states have synchronized high-precision enforcement cameras directly with traffic signals, tracking the exact moment a light turns red. Previously, there was often a slight buffer, giving drivers a realistic chance to clear safely. That buffer is gone. Now, if your rear tires haven't fully crossed the line at the exact moment the signal changes, it's automatically flagged. No warning, no explanation, just a citation generated instantly. What makes this stricter is that the system isn't evaluating your judgment. It's measuring position and timing with precision. Either you crossed in time or you didn't. That's all that matters. In states like Florida and New York, these violations may also impact insurance records. A single mistake at the wrong intersection can end up costing far more over time than the initial fine. The challenge is that old habits still feel natural. You see yellow, you calculate distance, and you proceed. But now that instinct can work against you. The system no longer accounts for human judgment. It operates on exact timing. The safest decision is often to stop. And that same zero-tolerance approach is now being applied inside your vehicle. You've heard "don't text and drive" countless times, but in 2026, enforcement has become much stricter. Several states, including California, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, now treat holding a phone as a primary violation. That means no other reason is needed to issue a citation. If a device is in your hand while you're on a public roadway, even at a red light or in traffic, it can count as a violation. What's catching people off guard is how this is being enforced. Advanced camera systems can now detect when a driver is holding a device, even briefly. You don't need to be texting or scrolling, just holding it can be enough. Beyond fines, this can also affect insurance outcomes. If there's evidence a device was in your hand during an incident, it may influence how responsibility is evaluated, but it gets even more specific. Even if you're using a mount and keeping your hands free, placement now matters in ways it didn't before. In 2026, multiple states introduced clear rules about where a phone can be positioned inside your car. The general requirement sounds simple: it must not obstruct your view. But enforcement has become much stricter. In places like California, Arizona, and Florida, mounting a phone in the center of the windshield, even just below the rearview mirror, can now be considered a violation. That setup, once common, is now viewed as obstructing forward visibility. The safest placement areas are typically the lower corners of the windshield or directly on the dashboard. Anything else can fall into a category that enforcement no longer treats as flexible. And this isn't just about roadside stops. Placement can also factor into how situations are evaluated afterward. Even small details can influence outcomes in ways drivers don't expect. That's the pattern here. These rules aren't just enforced in the moment, they can carry consequences later. And that same expansion of rules is now affecting how you pass other vehicles. Most drivers already know to move over for emergency vehicles, but starting in 2026, that requirement has expanded significantly. If any vehicle is stopped on the shoulder with hazard lights, whether it's a stranded driver, a tow truck, or a service vehicle, you're now required to either change lanes or significantly reduce speed. In many states, that means slowing down well below the posted limit if you can't safely move over. The goal is safety, but enforcement has become stricter. Some areas now treat violations more seriously, with higher penalties and added consequences. What makes this challenging is that not every situation allows perfect execution. Traffic conditions may limit your options, but what matters is how your response appears: clear, visible action to slow down or move over when possible. That shift from intent to visible compliance is becoming a consistent theme across these updates. Which brings us to another rule that seems small but is catching thousands of drivers. A light rain starts, you turn on your wipers without thinking. In 2026, that simple action now triggers a legal requirement in many states. If your windshield wipers are on, your headlights must also be on. No exceptions. This applies regardless of time of day or how light the rain is. Wipers on means headlights on. Enforcement can come from both officers and automated systems. Some systems can detect wiper activity and compare it with lighting status. If your headlights, including tail lights, aren't fully activated, a citation may follow. Many drivers assume daytime running lights are enough, but they typically don't activate rear lights. Full headlights are required to meet the rule. The fines may not be the highest, but the ease of making this mistake is what makes it significant. It can happen without you even realizing it. The simplest way to avoid it is to make it automatic. Whenever the wipers go on, the headlights go on too. Every time. Because in 2026, it's not just about knowing the rules. It's about adjusting habits before those small moments turn into real consequences. To deal with it in the first place. Because once you understand how all of this fits together, the pattern becomes clear. The driving laws of 2026 aren't focused on major, obvious mistakes anymore. They're designed around small, everyday behaviors, the kind people repeat without thinking. And when those small violations start to add up, the consequences escalate much faster than most expect. It's no longer just about getting a single ticket. It's about how those tickets accumulate over time. And in several major states, the entire system behind your driving record has changed. In the past, most states tracked violations over an 18-month window. That gave drivers some flexibility. Older infractions would fade out relatively quickly, and minor mistakes didn't follow you for long. But as of early 2026, states like New York, Illinois, and Florida have expanded that window to 24 months. That means every ticket, every point, every infraction stays on your record longer than before. And it's not just the timeline. The weight of those violations has increased too. In some cases, significantly. For example, in New York, the threshold for automatic license suspension has been lowered, while certain violations now carry much higher point values. Actions that once seemed minor can now have a much bigger impact on your record. At the same time, another major shift has rolled out across much of the country: construction zone enforcement. In many states, violations that occur in marked construction zones now carry amplified consequences. Not just higher fines, but increased impact on your driving record. What catches people off guard is that these zones don't always require active workers. If the signs are present, the zone is considered active. That means even late at night with no visible construction, the stricter rules still apply. This is where risk builds quietly. A couple of small mistakes spread over time can now lead to much more serious outcomes than before, including potential license suspension. And once that happens, getting reinstated can involve added costs, delays, and long-term effects. The takeaway here is simple but important. Treat construction zones with extra caution and assume every violation carries more weight than it used to. Because the system isn't just tracking behavior anymore, it's holding onto it longer and using it more aggressively. Now, here's something most drivers overlook. There's a small detail hanging in millions of vehicles right now that rarely gets a second thought. It could be an air freshener, a parking tag, or something decorative that's been there for years. In 2026, that same item can now be enough to trigger a traffic stop. Several states have tightened enforcement around rearview mirror obstructions. The rule is straightforward. If something is hanging from your mirror and it's visible, it can be considered a violation. The fine itself may not seem significant, but that's not where the real impact comes from. What matters is that it gives a valid reason for a stop, and once that stop happens, everything else comes into play. Documents, vehicle condition, and any additional issues that might be identified. That's why this change matters. Not because of the penalty alone, but because of what it can lead to. And what makes it tricky is how normal these items feel. Things that never seemed like a problem before are now being treated differently under updated enforcement standards. The safest approach is simple. If it hangs from your mirror, remove it. Small details matter more now than they used to, and that idea that small changes can lead to bigger consequences extends beyond just objects in your car. It's also affecting who is allowed to drive in the first place. In some areas, updated license renewal processes now include more thorough evaluations. What used to be a basic vision check may now involve additional assessments related to reaction time and awareness. The goal is safety, but it also means the process is becoming more detailed for certain drivers. At the same time, some regions have introduced stricter vehicle condition requirements tied to registration. For example, tire condition standards have been raised in certain areas. If a vehicle doesn't meet those requirements, registration renewal may be delayed until the issue is corrected. These changes affect different drivers in different ways, but they all point to the same shift. Driving is no longer just about behavior behind the wheel. It's also about meeting a growing set of conditions: physical, mechanical, and regulatory. Before moving forward, there's something important to keep in mind. Most drivers will be affected by at least one of these changes simply because they're new and not widely understood yet. But now you're aware, and that awareness is what helps you stay ahead. If you want to keep up with how these rules are evolving, make sure you're following US Updates Hub, because these changes are happening quickly. Now we're moving into the part where the consequences become more serious. One of the most impactful changes involves license plates. In 2026, several states have tightened rules around anything that interferes with plate visibility. And this doesn't just mean obvious obstruction. It includes covers, frames, or anything that could affect readability, especially for automated systems. The expectation is simple. Plates should be fully clear and easily readable. What makes this important is how strictly it's being enforced. Even small details like certain types of frames or protective covers can now lead to penalties. These items were once common and widely accepted, but under updated standards, they can create unnecessary risk. The safest option is complete clarity. No covers, no frames, nothing that could interfere with visibility. And if that feels like a shift, the next change goes even further by focusing on real-time monitoring. In 2026, several systems have improved how insurance status is tracked. Updates between insurance providers and state systems can now happen much faster, which means any lapse in coverage may be identified more quickly than before. If a policy expires or there's a gap, that information can become visible to enforcement systems sooner than many drivers expect. That's why it's more important than ever to ensure your coverage stays active without interruption. Setting up automatic payments or reminders can help prevent issues before they happen. At the same time, modern vehicles are increasingly equipped with systems that track driving patterns, things like braking, speed changes, and general driving behavior. In some cases, this data may be used to help assess risk levels. This represents another shift. Driving is no longer judged only by what's visible on the road, but also by data collected in the background. And now we reach one of the biggest changes of all: technology inside the vehicle itself. Newer vehicles are being equipped with advanced safety systems designed to monitor driver behavior. These systems can track patterns like steering consistency and driver attention, with the goal of improving safety. If certain thresholds are reached, the system may respond by issuing alerts or taking protective actions. While the intention is to reduce accidents, it also introduces a new dynamic, where technology plays a more active role in how driving decisions are made. And that leads to a broader realization. Driving is no longer just about the person behind the wheel. It's becoming a shared interaction between the driver and the systems built into the vehicle. When you step back and look at everything together, the pattern is clear. This isn't just a few rule updates. It's a complete shift in how driving is defined, monitored, and enforced. From intersections to in-car behavior to behind-the-scenes data, the margin for error has narrowed significantly. And the drivers most affected aren't the reckless ones, they're the ones who haven't adapted yet. So here's what actually matters moving forward. Make sure your license plate is fully visible. Place your phone in a compliant position, ideally on the dashboard or a safe lower area. Build the habit, wipers on means headlights on. Means remove anything hanging from your mirror. Keep your insurance active without gaps. Treat construction zones with extra caution, and take a moment to understand the systems in your vehicle and how they operate. These are simple adjustments, but they make a real difference. Because these rules are already in place and they're already being enforced. Staying informed and adapting early is what helps you avoid problems before they start. This content is for educational and informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice. Regulations may vary by location and can change over time. Always verify current rules through official sources or consult a qualified professional.